Alright, so in today's video I want to share with you guys an unexpected consequence of quitting smoking weed that I've experienced and that I've seen hundreds of other individuals who we've helped quit also experience. And it's not the withdrawals, it's not seeing more money in your bank account or improving your relationships or having more energy after quitting. It's none of those things. It's an increase of self-awareness, an increase of self-presence. And it's really important that you understand today's topic and that you're prepared for this increase of self-awareness after you quit, because if you don't approach it properly, it can become very, very overwhelming and it can lead to some really negative outcomes after quitting cannabis. So if you're struggling with a cannabis substance use disorder and you want to do it right, you're in the right place when it comes to quitting, okay? So the first question we have to answer is, what is self-awareness to begin with? We have internal self-awareness and we have external self-awareness. Internal self-awareness is developing mental clarity around our own values, our own thoughts, our own emotions, and our own weaknesses. An external sense of self-awareness is realizing how our behaviors, our actions, and our thought processes impact those around us, how others respond to us. And this is something that I really struggled with when I was struggling with substance use, to cannabis, nicotine, alcohol, binge drinking, all that stuff. My perception of how others perceived me was always screwed up, as was my perception of self. Why is it so important that we get this right? Statistically speaking, only 10 to 15% of people have an actual sense of self-awareness. That means that 90% of people have a massive blind spot in their life because they lack self-awareness. And in many cases, we can tie that lack of self-awareness back to substance use. And I'm gonna show you exactly why that is and how that works, especially with cannabis. Now, why is it important that we're in the 10 to 15% who have this and not the 90% of people that don't? Because having an increased level of self-awareness can lead to more communication and a more fulfilled sense of purpose. It can lead to an increase in confidence. It can lead to more creativity, and it can, quite frankly, make you more profitable in almost every aspect of life. Now, the opposite is also true. If you don't have a good sense of self-awareness, it's going to take away from your profits, it's going to take away from your confidence, it's going to take away from your communication skills, and a whole host of other things. And I'll tell you, I've seen this time and time again. When we're working with people one-on-one inside our addiction exit protocol, I always look to check off that stage after quitting cannabis of increased self-awareness. And we'll get messages like this from this person who's making much more revenue for their law practice, or we'll get messages like this from this person who just quit drinking alcohol and they're starting to develop a greater sense of self-awareness regarding their other behaviors, okay? So this stuff, when you comprehend it, it can be life-changing. Having an increased sense of self-awareness is truly like gaining a superpower. It gives you an edge over 90% of people walking around out there on this planet today. And if that's something that you value and you feel that substance use is holding you back from it, we have a science-backed method that has a 98% client success rate at helping people quit nicotine and cannabis in as little as 48 hours. We can do it privately without disrupting your public life and image, and we can do it without relapse. This method is specifically designed for high-level professionals and high-performance individuals. If that's you, check out the link in the video description and the pinned comment to learn more. It's impossible to fix a problem in your life if you don't know what that problem is. If you don't have the mental clarity to see what is problematic for you, it is impossible to come up with a solution or a system to arrive upon a solution. And if you don't get this right, it just winds up leaving you significantly more confused. I'm going to give you two examples of this real quickly. We recently helped a gentleman, high-level business professional, come off of alcohol through an at-home detox. And this individual was also consuming massive quantities of caffeine, right? So he'd drink alcohol, he wouldn't get a good night's sleep, he'd wake up, he'd drink a bunch of caffeine to keep up with the kids and his work performance, and then the caffeine would make him anxious, it would give him racing thoughts, and then in turn, because he drank so much caffeine, he wouldn't be able to sleep at night, so then he would drink more alcohol to try and unwind. The alcohol would lead to a poor night's sleep, he'd wake up fatigued and disorganized, and you can see how this cycle goes on and on. Now, this is what I'm going to say if you don't get this right. This gentleman, and rightfully so, he went to see a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist said, look, you're not drinking that much. You're successful. You have a family. I think you just have more of a sleeping problem and an anxiety problem. So they put him on anti-anxiety medication and heavy-hitting sleeping pills like Lunesta and stuff like that. Now, here's the crazy thing. After 2 weeks of working with us and quitting alcohol successfully after our first phone conversation, he started to gain an awareness of how significantly caffeine was negatively impacting him. So we worked together on that. He cut back his caffeine intake by like 75%. And within 4 days of doing that, he was already sleeping better and starting to question his need for an anti-anxiety medication and a heavy-hitting sleeping medication that comes with a whole host of other negative side effects, especially when you're trying to run a business and you got employees and kids and all that stuff. So, by quitting alcohol, this gentleman started to develop a level of awareness regarding his other behaviors and how those other behaviors may have been negatively impacting his life. And by doing so, we avoided a ton of confusion and other negative consequences that could have occurred as side effects to the medications that he was prescribed by a psychiatrist that also did nothing to help him quit alcohol. I just had another recent example of this. Me, my wife, my son, we were out after pumpkin picking this past weekend, and we were out with one of her friends, and her friend, by the time we went to lunch, was on her second cup of coffee, and she had said she drank a pre-workout product this morning. She's real into fitness and stuff like that, and she knows what I do. And she was asking me about pre-workout products. And she was saying, they just put me on an anti-anxiety medication at night because I have all these racing thoughts and I'm just always so overwhelmed. And I had said to her, look, if you shot me up with 700 milligrams of caffeine by 12 o'clock in the afternoon, I would need a sleeping medication too. I would need an anti-anxiety medication too. And she was like, oh my gosh, I never thought that this could be a problem. Now, why didn't she recognize that it was a problem? Because she's been doing this behavior, she's built up a tolerance, and she doesn't have any introspection as to how negatively this caffeine consumption was impacting her sleep quality and her mental health. So she did the same thing, go to see a doctor, they put her on sleep meds, anti-anxiety meds. You can see the cycle over and over again. And had me and her not had that conversation, I don't know if or when she would have developed that awareness for this behavior that she was doing, similar to the guy that we were helping quit alcohol. It's like a light switch going off in the person's brain when we find these things. When you're addicted to cannabis, I say cannabis is very much like the glue that holds all the crap together. So you're consuming cannabis, maybe you're binge scrolling or doom scrolling social media, you're watching adult media content, you're drinking caffeine because you're fatigued, then you're binge drinking on the weekends to get away from feeling so fatigued and so stressed because you're so tired from all this substance use on the weekends. And it's like, how do you even know where to start identifying why you feel the way you feel? Where do you even start when you have that disaster going on, right? And that disaster was my life for 9 years. I lived it for 9 years. So when you quit substances, there's two areas of awareness that I think you're going to increase. One is addiction has a propensity to show you and reflect upon you the things in life that you're grateful for. Everyone who's quitting a substance typically has a reason. They want better health, they want more wealth, they want to perform better in their career, they want to fix their relationship with their wife and their kids, maybe it's related to faith practice. Addiction stands to take away from you the things that you value most in life. But most people, 90% of people, go around not even aware of the things that they are most grateful for in life. But if you go through the experience of addiction, and you start to lose some of those things or slowly start to watch and feel some of those things falling apart, it almost becomes like its own practice of gratitude. It's like a mirror showing us the things in life that we actually value. So for me, substance use, getting addicted to weed, getting addicted to nicotine, binge drinking, getting cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, literally losing my mind in an acute state of psychosis was a reflection to me of the things in life that I actually valued most. It increased my awareness for my thoughts, for my emotions, for my values. Another thing that you're going to develop an increased level of awareness of is things that you want to fix. So I work with a lot of people and, we'll get them off of weed, off of alcohol, off of nicotine, and they'll be like, my physical health isn't that good. I've gotten really out of shape, right? We were just working with an MD, and it's particularly tough for medical professionals to face this because, they know so much. But He was addicted to cannabis, addicted to stimulants, had some other problems with media content. And he was like, now that I've quit, I can't believe how much I've let my body go. I can't believe how poor my nutrition is and my exercise regimens are, right? So he started to gain an awareness for another aspect of his life he wanted to fix. People also have these realizations in their health, or in their wealth. They also have these realizations in their relationships. I can't tell you the amount of people that I've spoken to where they're consuming cannabis or some other drug, and they're sweeping problems in their relationships under the rug because they don't want to face them. It's too challenging. It's too big of a thing. So people will sometimes quit substances and be like, I really got to address this relationship problem with my wife, my husband, with my kids. And then you'll develop an awareness for other behaviors, like the example I gave you with the gentleman who was drinking and consuming caffeine. Once you stop consuming cannabis, you're no longer going to be content with your status quo behaviors. If you're really into playing video games and you're used to smoking weed while you play video games, or you smoke weed and you watch a bunch of adult media content, it creates this place in which you're giving yourself permission to have other crappy behaviors, right? So if you gave me a bunch of weed and a bunch of nicotine and a bunch of alcohol, and then put me in front of a computer and told me to watch adult media content, I wouldn't really think much of it. I wouldn't have an awareness of how negatively that adult media content is impacting me because I have all these other drugs in my system, all this other stuff going on. When you stop the drugs, when you stop the cannabis, suddenly you're sitting there gaming, watching adult media content, wasting time on your phone, doom scrolling through political events, and you wake up and you say, what the heck am I doing? I'm not okay with this. This is not okay. I'm going to jump around here. This is where that can become problematic. Because people will start to develop this elevated level of self-awareness and they'll say, all right, I have to fix all of these things at once. I have to stop the doom scrolling. I have to stop using nicotine. I have to redo my diet. I have to get to the gym 5 days a week. They wind up trying to build Rome in a day. They become extraordinarily overwhelmed, especially high performers, high level individuals, because they have, family life. They got the busy work life. They got all these other things they're trying to keep up. And now they're adding more to their plate than they're able to tolerate handling. So as you develop that increased sense of awareness, you have to be careful about the order in which you're going to approach fixing things, as to not overwhelm yourself, burn yourself out. Because what happens if you feel burned out and overwhelmed when you're addicted to cannabis or alcohol or something like that? You go back to consuming more of the substance, okay? Now, another way to not fall into this trap is instead of asking, why do I feel like crap? Why do I feel like ads, right? That's what I said, AZZ, right? You get it? The question you should be asking is, what behaviors are making me feel like crap? So not why do I feel like garbage? Because what's going to happen is you're going to come up with your own thoughts, your own beliefs, and you're going to come to a conclusion that may not be true. But if you actually ask the question, what other behaviors are making me feel like this? Now we can come to a solution. If you focus on asking what versus why, it takes you away from being the problem and it allows you to identify outside factors that are making you feel the way you feel, and that puts the power of change in your control. You combine that with not trying to fix everything at once, and I promise you're going to be in much better shape for handling this increased level of self-awareness that you can expect to ascertain after quitting cannabis. If this appeals to you, we have a science-backed method that has a 98% client success rate at helping people quit nicotine and cannabis in as little as 48 hours. We do it privately, without group meetings, without having to go to rehab, without having to admit you're powerless and broken, because you're not. And we can do this without disrupting your public life and image. It's built specifically for high-level professionals and high-performance individuals. So if that's you, check out that link in that video description in the pinned comment. Now lastly, there's some major advantages to having this increased level of self-awareness if it's approached correctly. When you have this, it allows you to look back on previous experiences and turn them into an opportunity to learn something. This is why I'm able to move beyond active addiction without a ton of regret and shame and remorse. I have an increased level of self-awareness. I've taken that and I've taken the experiences I got from addiction and sobriety, and I've turned it into a learning experience that has dramatically changed my career, my family life, my mental health, and my physical health. Having increased levels of self-awareness is also very good when it comes to planning ahead. because when you plan ahead for things, you can avoid future problems and complications. When you can look back at past experiences and plan ahead, you can see what the bottlenecks are, you can see what the problems are, and you can start to put systems in place in order to mitigate them next time around. This is why having increased levels of self-awareness after quitting drinking, smoking, vaping, whatever, is just a game changer for people when it comes to their health, their wealth, their relationships, their faith practice, whatever it may be for you. It really, really is a big deal. I've seen it change my life, and I've seen it change the lives of hundreds, if not thousands of other individuals. So if you enjoyed today's content, I want you to follow me right into the next video where I talk about where we actually saw these increased levels of self-awareness and applied them in the case of that gentleman who was binge drinking alcohol and consuming a bunch of caffeine. And I want you to see a little bit more about how that radically changed his life and his business and everything in between. All right, guys, I'll see you right in that next video.